Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and in this video we are going to be talking about Pantheon, Rise of the Fallen. In case you don't know what that is, it's an MMORPG being developed by Visionary Realms that has its roots steeped in old school MMOs, specifically that of EverQuest. I got to try the game out in its current pre-alpha stage, which I believe is pre-alpha 4, and I wanted to share my thoughts with you on YouTube. So I'm going to be doing a mostly freeform thoughts style video on this one, so expect me to flub over my words here and there. So in the approximately 1 hour of gameplay I got to experience with Pantheon, I mostly was there to test out its combat and its core systems. As it is still very early on, certain things like animations and spell effects may not have been working to the fullest of their ability. I want to remind everyone repeatedly, it is pre-alpha. It is not even in its alpha phases yet, so it is still very, very early on what you're seeing right now. Now, for the 1 hour of gameplay I got to experience, I was playing a Shaman as myself, some fellow streamers, and some of the devs went through Avendir's Pass. While we were walking through there, we discovered certain objects that had some lore behind them. We went through a camp controlled by a bunch of trolls, and we were eventually teleported to a dungeon where we took on a ghostly boss and his ghostly attendants. Now, I was pretty impressed that the core system seemed mostly intact, which is a good thing in a pre-alpha. Those are the things you should be focusing in before you actually let it loose to a larger player base. And it was all working fairly well. The render distance went pretty far, and it held up performance-wise fairly well. Obviously not a whole ton of things on the screen at the current moment, but I expected it to be worse for something that's this early in development. And of course, they assured me that there's more things that are being done. You know, there's so much optimization that hasn't been done yet. And so there's a lot of updates that are going to be done in regards to that. And considering it's already running at its core this well, I think it's off to a good start. So I had a pretty good initial impression, at least, of the core systems for the game. As we were walking through and we were running into the various enemies that we were just skipping by since we were pretty over-leveled. I believe we were level 25, and the enemies we were walking by were mostly in their 5s or 10s until we got to the troll camp. It was just something that I was kind of slightly immersing myself in. I would stop and I would walk up to a campfire, and when I would walk up to a campfire, I'd get a message that says, something's wrong, or something happened here, or whatnot. And it was almost like this, I don't want to say dynamic quest system, but it was like this lore system where I could turn a corner and learn something about the world. And I found that was pretty nice. It was not something I expected, and I made sure to immediately stop and ask, whoa, why did it just say that when I walked up to here? And there's a full explanation of that. In fact, if you want to actually just straight up watch the footage that I'm going over right now, I will include a link to that in the description over on my Twitch channel, so be sure to give that a look. Eventually, we found our way to the troll encampment, and this is where I kind of got to see how it was steeped in its old school roots. You know, we were mostly focusing on, CCing one target and tanking one target off to the side and just trying to kill that one safely. We were taking our time between pulls, making sure we had mana, making sure we had buffs and things like that. And it definitely felt old school to me. Now, I did not have much experience with EverQuest itself. The only EverQuest experience I have is Champions of Norath on the PS2. And that's more of a Diablo-style game than it is an EverQuest style game. Great PS2 game, by the way. And so I did have some of the feelings, though, that I felt when I played like Final Fantasy XI back in the day. I would have to rest for mana between pulls, or even in the middle of a pull while we were tanking something or killing something or waiting for a patrol to pass or anything along those lines. And so there were very familiar feelings to me with this one. One thing in particular that I feel like I did not get to test, and this was more, I guess, just because of the classes we ended up picking, one thing that's big with Pantheon is teamwork, and that includes synergy between the classes that you're actually playing as. Now, on the website, there are 12 classes listed, and the one that we didn't have is called Enchanter. Now, of course, we didn't have more than that, but Enchanter is the one I actually kind of wanted to see, because resource management, specifically MP or mana, definitely something that you need to manage closely, and something that having any sort of other player that can assist you in generating MP back is going to be of major value, and Enchanter is one of those things. So we didn't really get to test, I guess, the synergy between the classes that we had all too well, and that is something I want to see more of, because it's always tough whenever I'm sitting there waiting for MP to regenerate. And yes, while I have the time maybe to be a little bit more social, sometimes I just want to make sure that I'm contributing as much as possible. And that can be a little bit difficult if I'm not making sure constantly that I'm sitting down to get MP back. So it has its pros and its cons. Those of you who are more the fan of the old school kind of take it slow and make sure you manage everything properly kind of scenario with enemies that can overwhelm you if you maybe overstep even just a little bit, then this is definitely going to resonate with you a little bit more. But for those looking for crazy fast pace and mana's going up, down all the time, that's probably not the kind of experience you're going to be getting here. You're going to have to be calm, you're going to have to be calculated, and you're going to have to be strategic going into every battle. Even against enemies that may be a level or two under you, these enemies were 5 levels under us, and they didn't take much in the way of strategy, but they did hurt if we let them just kind of go all out and do whatever they wanted to, especially those primalists. Now, after fighting off several trolls, managing our mana, we moved over into a dungeon, which we had some dev cheats to help us get through this one because it is quite a long dungeon. You need to scour the dungeon for a key that eventually opens you up to the private quarters of the final boss, which was this ghostly boss NM that would gradually teleport back to the middle to summon adds, which we could have our damage dealers deal with while our tank tanked the boss itself. Had an ability that would reflect spells back at you if you cast it during the actual skill, which was called Regret. And then on top of that, he could put a very powerful circle down that any melee in range of it would take a ton of damage, and you would have to heal the tank through it. Managed to get through it, though, pretty soundly. Constant mana issues were a bit of a problem. It seemed like the boss had some sort of way of draining mana with one of his skills at that. So it was definitely an issue I found myself running into quite a bit inside of this dungeon. But overall, the gameplay experiences and again the core systems I felt were working fairly well, and I'm really hoping to get my hands on this again. Of course, it being pre-alpha, I need the developers to give me the ability to try it again. I'm not going to overstay my welcome there, but I'm really happy that they let me try this out because I'm someone who has old school experience, just not in the EverQuest category. And so I'm always curious to learn more about the roots of certain MMOs. I've seen and played my UO. I've played Final Fantasy 11. I've seen and played Vanilla WoW. So I've been to some of these like old school things, but a lot of them were inspired by EverQuest or drew elements from EverQuest or drew elements from UO. And I don't have as much experience with that generation of MMOs. I was a bit late to it, being born, at 90 and just not having the experience early on. So for me, Pantheon is kind of like a learning experience, almost like a history lesson, but it's a history lesson that's being built in 2018. And in such a way that we have new technology in 2018 that lets you do more things with those systems. So I'm curious to see how a game that wants this sort of old school feel does in 2018, 2019. Obviously it's going to be a while before it gets into a more publicly playable state with it being in pre-alpha. But you know what I mean? Just something that's modern, but still steeped in the old school. I want to see how that marriage of ideas actually ends up going for something that wants you to, focus on teamwork and wants you to focus on relationships with your friends or relationships with your enemies at that, and to develop these longer standing relationships as opposed to kind of the modern era short relationships that have kind of become the standard in other MMOs. Things I'm looking forward to seeing in future alpha or pre-alpha phases. I don't know how long it'll be in pre-alpha. Animations is something definitely. I'm glad they didn't focus on it that much early on because animations can always be done later. Spell effects, of course, getting to learn everything about the various classes, seeing, enemies, and it's mostly actually animations is probably the majority of the things, making sure all the skills work properly too, or maybe working on the UI so it's a little bit more intuitive. But for the most part, again, I didn't have much trouble navigating much of anything here. I was able to remap skills, or remap buttons. I was able to figure out all of the different menu items to open, where to find everything. There were some old school elements like downscaling skills in order to conserve mana or to go up against various enemies. So I could have the same spell on multiple ranks if I just wanted to have different degrees of power regarding specific spells. They also heavily restrict the amount of skills you can use. I believe you can take 12 into combat. Your 1 to equal sign on your numbers on your keyboard. And but you can have more than that between downscaling and actual skills that you pick up as you learn, as you level up. You have way more than 12 skills, so you want to be picking the skills and spells that are best suited for individual scenarios, and you'll find yourself switching through those pretty often. I need more than an hour's worth of gameplay to judge these systems to see, how varied that actually is. How often do you take the same types of skills? Is there skills that just stand out no matter what? I can imagine for the class I'm playing, which I was taught, which I'll talk about in a second here, that there are certain things I would pretty much always take, but that there were definitely some things elementally aspected at the very least that would probably swap up depending on the thing that I'm actually fighting. So as I said, speaking of the class I played Shaman, and I should probably talk a little bit about the Shaman itself. It's one of the 12 classes available, and it is a more supporty type class. It's able to deal some damage, it's able to deal some healing, but its utility in different aspects are the things that you really want to focus on. My healing is heal over time type spells with my water boon and the skills that use it. So basically when I place a water boon on an ally, they'll regenerate health over time, and then I can consume that boon with my various other abilities to enhance them. I have a direct heal, I have an AoE heal, I have a heal over time, and these different things can utilize the water boon to boost their power if I actually have one placed on an ally. On the flip side, my more offensive abilities are really focused more on their utility than they are their raw damage, and most of them tend to combo together. For example, I could place a Fire Bane on an enemy with one spell, and that might have one effect. It might make it so they're more susceptible to fire spells. So if I have anyone else on my team that is dealing fire damage, it's helping them. On top of that, I can then make use of that Bane and apply another spell on top of them with an Animus, and that will give them additional effects. It may like blind them, for example, or cause their attacks to become glancing blows as opposed to direct attacks. So there's all these different effects, being able to lower armor with my Earth Banes, and there's more and more of that. But it is a very supporty class, I suppose. I almost said a different word, but I'm capable of helping heal. I'm capable of helping debuff and add a little bit of damage to enemies, and it's an interesting prospect. There's plenty of different ones on there, and if you check the actual website, it will tell you what kind of like the key aspects are. Shaman, for example, one of the key things is that as I cast spells, my spell casting gets faster over time. Or I could have something where like a percentage of my heals, I receive a percentage of the heals that I give to other people. So there's all sorts of different things there, different passives, different actives, and you can check all of them out on the website. Of course, it's all subject to change since it's in pre-alpha, but it'll give you a general idea of what the goal is for these classes going forward. And with that, with only an hour of gameplay, I guess I can't really talk about too many other things. I'm sure a lot of you are probably wondering about stuff like crafting. I've had people tell me that crafting is in the next, like, I guess patch or pre-alpha or something along those lines. I don't want to misspeak, but it's not something that's currently present. I did try to skin something. It said I didn't have a skinning knife. So that's something that's worth looking at the very least. But there's not really too many other things I can say. I can't talk too much about the towns, about NPC interactions, because I was mostly focused on gameplay and core systems, and I'm glad that I got to experience those things. It was a pretty good first impression, a better first impression of some other kind of old school focused MMOs that I played in recent times. And I'm looking forward to seeing how it develops. I'll definitely be posting a follow-up video if I get the opportunity to play Pantheon again. And thank you to the Pantheon devs and Visionary Realms for allowing me to take part in this. It was a pleasure, and my community, as I was streaming it on Twitch, definitely enjoyed it as well. So if you guys are looking forward to more stuff on Pantheon, if I get my hands on it again anytime soon or anytime in the future, and I can post a video like this again, I definitely will. So be sure to keep an eye out for those. But on that note, that's going to be a wrap for me. Be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, and share, and stay tuned. Hopefully I'll have some more stuff on Pantheon over the coming months, years, however long, and whenever I have the opportunity. Anyway, thanks again, and I'll see you in the next one. Until then, take care.